Okay, today we're going to look at RI.8.9, and that's analyzing a case in which two or more texts provide conflicting information on the same topic and identify where the texts disagree on matters of fact or interpretation. So they're providing conflicting information. One person saying one thing, another person saying another. So let's jump right into it. And we have this article, Are You Eating GM Food by Richard Boylan. Now, we're all probably not real familiar with what GM food is, but they're genetically modified foods. So when we read this, I'll be saying GM food. So let's read what Richard Boylan has to say about genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods have been slowly entering our diet since the mid-1990s. These are foods that have been altered in laboratories for many beneficial purposes. So let's just underline that because that does define what GM foods are. They've been altered in laboratories for many beneficial purposes. And what are those purposes? To thrive in cold conditions, to resist pests and diseases, or to achieve faster growth. Other foods are modified to make them more nutritionally rich. For example, certain types of rice have been engineered so that they provide more of the nutrients needed in countries where rice is the main part of the daily diet. Although there may be certain benefits of GM foods, we are not entirely sure of the side effects. Some may cause allergic reactions, for example, or increase cholesterol. Unfortunately, there are currently no labeling rules for modified foods, so consumers have no way of knowing which GM foods they may place in their shopping carts as they stroll through store aisles. The makers of GM food claim these foods don't differ significantly from natural varieties. They also say they do not want warning labels on their product. However, there are too many unknowns and potential dangers surrounding these foods. More GM research needs to be shared with consumers. They have a right to know exactly what is in the foods they purchase. So we can see from these two paragraphs how Richard Boylan feels about GM foods. He uses the first paragraph to define, to tell us what GM foods are. And then he starts giving us the facts and his side about GM food. It says, he starts off and said, there may be benefits, however, we are not entirely sure of their side effects. They cause allergic reactions. They increase cholesterol. And he says there's no labeling for the modified foods, so we as customers don't know really the side effects or what we're putting into our bodies. Then he goes on to how there are no warning labels. He definitely feels, this author, Richard Boylan, definitely feels there should be warning labels for GM foods. And we know this because of this last sentence. They have the right to know exactly what is in the food they purchase. So let's look at what, and we're going to kind of lose all this. I hate that we can't keep it up there. But let's look. How does the author interpret facts about genetically modified food? The author feels that GM foods may be dangerous and they need to be labeled correctly so that consumers know what they are buying. Now, if you look at that statement, the author feels that GM foods may be dangerous. Yes, he does. Right here, this is where he talks about them being dangerous. And then he thinks that they need to be labeled. And we said in the third paragraph is where he talks about that. So let's look at filling one or more points of interpretation from this account. Well, basically, here it is. They're dangerous and they need to be labeled. So that could go there. So we can see that the author is not for GM foods. Let's look at a different article now. Let's look at a conflicting article. An article that is written by someone who sees it differently than Bullen did. Right off the bat, we can tell they have conflicting ideas by their titles. Let's real quickly scroll back up. Are you eating GM food? He poses a question, but you see what she does in her article. She says that they're superfoods. GM crops are superfoods by Charla Silva. We can tell that she's for them because she calls them superfoods. With the world's population projected to reach 9.3 billion by 2050, what is everyone going to eat? Genetically modified superfoods may be the part of the answer. These are plants that have been modified to be more resistant to pests, cold, diseases, and drought. The benefits of these genetically modified superfoods are endless, and they could be vital to supporting our growing world. Some people are concerned about eating foods with altered DNA, fearing that there may be unknown side effects. However, GM foods do not differ significantly from natural foods, and there is no reason for not moving forward with their development. Very quickly, there's one sentence in here that they both agree on, and that's the same in both accounts. They both say, we'll use green, these are plants that have been modified to be more resistant. They both define GM foods the same way. But then they're different because she's wanting to use these foods to be a part of the answer to the growing population. She says that they would be vital or essential. Vital means essential to supporting our growing world, right? She says that they do not differ significantly from natural foods, whereas the previous one said that, what did he say? Let me flip back here. He said there's harmful side effects, allergic reactions, high cholesterol. There's too many dangers and unknowns is what he says. But she says they don't differ significantly from natural foods, which means they're not that different from foods that are grown naturally. We can see that these two authors definitely have a conflicting point of view about GM crops or GM food. Which statement best explains how the two authors disagree? So let's look. Bullen thinks that GM foods may cause allergies and should be labeled, but Silva sees only the benefits of these foods. Well, this does sound pretty good because we know up here we said that Bullen says they cause allergies and they need to be labeled. And Silva talks all about the benefits, how they're vital to supporting our growing country. So this one looks pretty good. So we'll kind of just leave that one right where it is. But let's go on and see. Silva believes that GM foods are superfood, but Bullen thinks GM foods can only cause harm. Well, she does believe they are superfood, and he does believe they're harmful, but the word here that's tricking you up is only cause harm. He does list a few things that, let me go back and kind of look in my paper. He says, although there may be certain benefits of GM food, so he doesn't talk about them only causing harm. So this is clearly not our answer. No. And remember, when we're finding this, we have to find the best. Bullen believes that GM foods may have some important benefits, but Silva believes that the benefits of GM food are not significant. Well, we can immediately cross this off because we know that Silva, she believes they are significant. So that not throws us off there. So this is definitely not an answer. Silva thinks the unknown dangers of GM foods are a major concern, and Bullen feels that GM foods are safe. Well, basically here they just got them mixed up because Bullen is the one that thinks the unknown dangers of the food are a major concern. So this is not your answer. So A is clearly your answer, and we can see that how they differ in their opinion on GM foods.